All right, so we're going to go over drawing and perspective in this one. Now, most schools teach this, so it's probably nothing new to a lot of you, but I'm going to recap this just in case anybody hasn't looked into this. Now, I know we're working in 2D, but even if you're doing 3D modeling, perspective can be quite important. It actually helps you decipher what's going on with your reference images if you're doing proportional modeling and whatnot. So, all right, so we're in here in Krita. I'm using a modified version of this pencil. It's basically a soft round brush, but what I'm going to do is while using it, you can hold V and then hold Shift. You can do a straight line out like that. Okay, so this is going to be your horizon line. That's the main idea. We're going over 2-point perspective first. So we do a point. This is going to be vanishing point 1. Do another point. That's going to be vanishing point 2. Press V, draw some lines out real quick. You can consider these like roadways or something like that. So pretty basic idea here. We got our horizon, 2 vanishing points, and now some roads that cross each other. The other way we work is just straight up. Okay. And then we go back down to those vanishing points as we go over the horizon line. And now we can do straight lines back here. And you can see we can make a cube or a building, whatever you want to look at this as, right? So we can keep drawing out to the vanishing points, and we can make smaller squares and things like that. If you ever want to find the center of something, you can do an X. Okay. And then just do your lines straight up and straight down. And you got the centers now, right? You want the center going in this direction, obviously, like that. Okay. This is how you start creating circles, more or less, or cylinders, whatever the case. And you're connecting here to there, basically. And you're trying to create this nice little balance in this area. A lot of times taking it at a quarter at a time is a lot easier than trying to do the full-on perspective circle. But that's the main idea. And so if we were to keep tracing vanishing points here, just for a moment, what we will find is that we can do a cube. We can see the back side of this still in the back here, right? As a result, we can do an X over here. And we can connect the two X's with a line. It should go actually all the way back to the vanishing point, like so. Right? So we can do another perfect setup over here, perhaps. So this is just how you're going to do your geometry, basically. Creating your forms and whatnot. So if you ever had to make a tire, you can connect the tops, the bottoms, you get the idea. So this is often what you're going to do for like vehicles and stuff like that. If you had another one, another tire, for example, it'd probably be back here somewhere. Just want to make a square. And you'd have that pretty much all lined up right there as well, right? So now we can do the same thing back over here, run this out to the vanishing point, run this out to that vanishing point. And eventually you can go ahead and do another side, set it up like that. So this is one of the ways you approach doing like vehicles and things like that, right? So that's 2-point perspective. And 3 points, kind of the same deal. Vanishing point, vanishing point. Just going to do a cross real quick like so. Let's imagine we have the same thing going on here. We're going to do another kind of square thing, right? But we have a third vanishing point. It's usually a lot higher, perhaps. And so you draw to that vanishing point as opposed to the just going straight up, right? And so that's your 3-point perspective. Everything you look at in real life is 3-point perspective, photographs and all that, right? With your eyes. You don't see things in 2-point. Now there is a 1-point perspective. It's worth knowing. Let's do that. Okay. Let's say we do one out like that, one out like that. We can do this. So we got the kind of wall, but we don't do another perspective. We just go straight with these edges. So this is something done quite heavily in concept art where you're making things with 1-point perspective. That's just because you can draw pretty much anything like you would in a side orthographic drawing, right? And as a result, you know, you can quickly shift things around and create like a 1-point perspective on it. Very easy to do that. See? It's almost like that bubble lettering that you learned as a kid. So it's the main idea of that one anyways, right? Cool. So you can draw anything flat. Say we're just doing some kind of hard surface design, something like this for now. You want to do a circle. You can bevel that corner like that. Right? Maybe do a big circle up here. That would be our corner there. Small one here. All right, so this is how you can come up with some hard surface designs, just quickly sketching it. Very easy. Just something I wanted to show you here in Krita. You hit Control T, you selected a lasso, Control T, hold Control, you can flip those around like that. So if you're clever with this, you can take these little sections and just move them. Hit T and move it back a little. Do something like that. Try to keep it in order there. You could create a 2-point perspective if you wanted on something like that. But you'll have to rearrange things a little bit. But for the most part, it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's not too bad. You can see how that worked out. So this is kind of the fun part about doing 2D is once you realize how perspective works and you practice with it a little bit, you can do pretty much everything in 3D. Some people call it 3D drawing. I agree with that. I think that's a good term for it. So make things like that happen. And when you want these shapes cut, right? You do like your edges like so, you mirror, or not mirror it, but you do a second parallel edge. You erase here and you do the little bit of shading in the middle. So you can break things into 2 parts perhaps, right? So you can always do things like that. Shift these silhouettes around a little bit because they're kind of off, but I think you get the main idea here. Perspectives are a lot of fun when it comes down to it. There's kind of a quick way of doing a 2-point, which is really good, which is just doing an X like this, right? And then you can do cross sections. So like the idea of a cross section is like when you're looking at a CAT scan of someone's brain or mechanical drawings, a lot of times have cross sections, right? It might be flat drawings, orthographic type, right? But cross section, this could be placed in here in perspective, right? How would you do that? Well, we could just try to force it over here and let's do that again. Control T before we move it. Hold Control. We could just try to lay it out like that. Like pretty much what we just did. Maybe rotate it a bit or whatever. Okay. Straighten it up. So you could do that and then continue working on it. And here's the main thing. This is just like your symmetry line usually, right? But you can create vanishing points still. And you see where that's going now, right? Do that number if needed. Okay. That's just one idea behind that. If you want it to be more accurate, what you want to do is you want to place these specifically so that this is the center, okay? And what ends up happening here is that as you create your vanishing points, you got something like this maybe. You can also grab these pieces like this, and it's sometimes better to do this on a new layer. So if you ever want to select it like that, go to Layer, click New, and Cut Selection to New Layer is a good one. Okay, I'll go to a new layer now. And so now, hit Control T, we can right click, do perspective, place it approximately correct, and we can just place the handles right in the corners where it should go. So if I don't mess it up. Anyways, that'll be a more accurate way of doing that, perhaps, as long as you have the right size square, basically. You can see our square is not technically the right size, but we'll squish it a little. Okay. So, or rectangle in our case, I guess, but that's it. That's all you got to do, really. Gets a little finicky here in Krita for that kind of stuff, but it's possible and it's doable. So another thing, if you didn't realize it, we're kind of creating these little vanishing points doing this like that. Whenever you just start sketching something, if you want a free sketch, like you're doing like a car or vehicle, and you just kind of free sketch, you think about perspective along the way here, make sure the wheels are in alignment or whatever the case. Maybe the wheels should be in alignment, not necessarily the body. Okay. But the main idea is going to still stick here, that you're trying to create vanishing points usually. Otherwise, if you do all parallel lines like this, they're all perfectly parallel. That's isometric drawing, right? Also really cool, but not what we're going over in this one. And so before we even get to those wheels, let's go ahead and go back a sec. We might need to establish our overall perspective, right? So we need to find maybe like a symmetry point. Now we got like a little cross section we can do. See where this is starting to head. Okay, but we can create our vanishing points right off the bat here. Maybe a little bit nicer than that. You can see we could dramatically change things around. So this could get a little bit squirrely. You see, like this is way off over here, all this stuff, right? So you might need to correct that a little bit. Let's use the eraser. Don't be afraid of using erasers in this process at all. I get very narrow as well. So sometimes you can just guesstimate things. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. But you can see that that would look a little bit better like that perhaps, right? So eventually we can run out all of our angles as needed. We can start to cut in the idea of a vehicle perhaps, right? Start getting something going over here. And because we have a kind of a symmetry point, you know, we should be able to knock this out fairly well across the whole shape here. You can see it becomes really narrow back here as well. Although I got that way off, I think. But we could definitely line things up, check them, make sure they're going in the right directions, and then get the perspectives right. So we can do like a kind of a rough draft start like this, just doing guidelines and basic blocky shapes. And then we can do another rough sketch over the top of this and try to clean it up even more as we go. So like this will just be like a guide basically. You can drop opacity, go back over it again later, and then you can start thinking about like how you want headlights in here, and maybe this comes up a little bit higher. So you can just, you know, rough in another kind of vehicle in here if you would. It's like a vehicle on your vehicle. But like you can see, we start to really start to get into the detail a little bit if we really wanted to. So if you're struggling with doing mechanical designs, free flowy curvy shapes, this is just kind of how you go about doing it. All right. So this is getting into more organic a little bit right here, where you start crossing edges like this, right? That could be a possibility you end up doing. But it's just something to know how to do, you know, practice people, practice whatever you got to practice really that you want to create. So you like this, we want coming back up over here. We want to make sure it's the same height, so we'd have to have another perspective here, right? And as a result, they need to all converge somewhere off in the distance. But we should be able to find our heights now, is the main idea here, right? So we'll be able to start working things out like that. Right? Trying to keep it simple here so I don't go too crazy with it right now, but like this we need to possibly line up. Right? And so when you watch guys that are drawing vehicles and other stuff online, a lot of times they don't go through this whole process of doing this. They kind of like go straight at it. And it's usually practice gets you there where you can start doing that, you kind of understand like what kind of curves you're going to want in certain kind of areas and what kind of depth and all that. They still do rough sketches a lot of times. So if you ever watch like a guy illustrating a vehicle and he's going through the shading process of it, it's more than likely that he's done a rough sketch already. Something kind of similar-esque to this, maybe a little bit smoother and not as many guidelines or something, but I see like our roof here, our vanishing point's somewhere way out there. So like this one can be a little hard to get right because like we don't know our extent here on where we're going and where these all converge. We don't have them crossing each other yet. Sometimes it could be a really far distance away, but like our roof would be somewhere in this area, right? And so that's the main idea there behind that one. Like we'll have to figure that out for sure. And as a result, it becomes very shallow right in this area. I'm not even getting it right, but yeah, it's going to get very shallow for the most part where it's like really hard to get it just right. Like these edges become very tedious sometimes. It's not a lot of perspective there, right? So you can start adding little flare elements and changing the window design and just tweaking the little edges. Every little edge, like every little thing it does matters kind of. Just use your eraser as needed. Don't feel bad if you don't get it right in the first shot. The ultimate goal at the end of the day is to get it right. It's not about being like this awesome artist that gets it right in every brush stroke the first time. That takes, experience or natural born talent, one or the other. I don't know. But eventually you'll get there. I certainly can't do it to this day, so I don't try, but yeah, and then you can cut these things up as well, and you can change them around. Do what you got to do to them, basically, right? Don't spin the canvas, by the way, if you're not used to, well, until you have a good layout, don't spin the canvas. That's what I'll say. You can see like this side's way too high. So we're like missing a lot of information in here. You see, it's getting a little noisy. If you ever run into this issue, just use a bigger eraser that's pressure sensitive. Just knock it back a little bit. Don't erase anything fully. Just knock it back till it's barely visible. And then try to go back through and just figure out like what is and is not working for you and why. This is kind of at a bad angle maybe, right? It's too much, too soon, too fast or something. So like these are pretty steep though. I've designed a little too much. All right, if you need softer edges, you can also knock it back. It's like very flat. Probably not a good idea. Pull that over a little. Right. Anyway, so we could go through the whole process of doing this until every like little nook, cranny, and crevice is just perfect. I mean, we can do the interior of the vehicle, the exterior. I mean, we could just go crazy. It's really not that hard or that challenging. By the end of it, like it feels challenging at the time, right? But you can end up with a perfect result if you want. Just taking your time through it. Just don't expect to be fast. Not right away, anyways. Right, and then you can add in your side skirts, your spoilers, your splitters, and everything else you want. Your grills, change them around, textures for your grills, all that other fun stuff. If you want to go through that whole setup there. But the main benefits of this really is that you're good at a certain point with this. Like you can see, it's just like we don't even have to do the other side of that one necessarily. It can still be useful to maybe run it right on that horizon or whatever. But now we can just do a tire later, you see. Our tires need to line up. I kind of missed that part. Maybe something more like that. Maybe that one felt a little too short. It definitely is a little bit. Tire goes way up there, not, you see? And then when you got to do the other side, once again, you do those splits all the way through, right? Midsections usually. Probably better to go from the vanishing point. You can definitely now start to see where like your tire is not right. But you have the ability to trace your perspective back out the other way. So if you ever needed like the other tire over here, maybe it's like rotated and it slightly pokes out a little bit, right? Like that happens time to time, but now you know where it would possibly stick out a little or whatever, right? We wouldn't see it on this one necessarily, but that's the main idea. And also like the depth, like we know which way to send it. Pretty important. Yeah. And if I took my time with that, we'd end up with a better result, obviously. Right? Tweak things a little bit if it just looks off. Not a big deal. And so we have designed a car, something like that. Later on, you go through and you render these things. Like you definitely want to do more work on it, first of all. I would highly recommend at a certain point, you could just copy it, I guess. Duplicate the layer. And then you probably want to work at a higher resolution at some point and go through this even more and make it even more accurate. Maybe drop it and just do some line art on top of it, or just another loose sketch so you can work with it quite a bit still. There's tons of little things in here that you'll want to go through and tweak and get just right and make little bevels and whatever you got to do to these things to make it look the way you want, right? So if you want like some lights in here, obviously. This is that next step. All based off perspective, right? So perspective's great. Learn it, study it. There's tons of different ways you can utilize it. Like it's not just about drawing something necessarily just like this. There's some really advanced stuff as well, where you might be doing like you might do something in perspective, and then now if you understand your perspective and you can place your object in a box of sorts or on a plane, you can split it in half, right? And then you can start to create units here by splitting everything in half again. You do more X's for those, right, to get perfect alignment. But now you have like 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 units, 4 units. And so you can do that for the height as well. Now you have 1 units, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units. You use the same sizes as these basically. For different little sections, the heights would change depending on which section of the vehicle you're looking at. It's based off the perspective as well, right? Anyway, so you'd have to like trace out to like a midsection and measure the height here in this area. You see? So there's really cool ways of doing that. So then later on, your box and your units, you can set up a grid. And you can say like the middle of the car is like 2 units high or something, right? And then the front is 1 unit high. And so then from here to here, it has a curve of something like so. You can measure it if you wanted to. But anyways, yeah, you could start turning this perspective image into an orthographic side drawing. But you can also do it from the top down as well. So you can do a top down drawing. And it gets even crazier than this because this is just for more mechanical stuff. You can do things like this perhaps. But there's like this really cool way of doing turnarounds for characters, which I'm not even going to attempt to do. I still don't understand this thing at all. But I tried looking into it. I just don't fully understand where you can like send them through like a prism of sorts. I forgot exactly how they do it. But they're able to reverse a character around to like any kind of different angle that they want, right? So that like you can do turnarounds of the character and have like the basic forms and proportions and dimensions, right? So you can, that's crazy, right? Like I don't even fully understand that one. So just keep that in mind. Perspective gets really, really wild sometimes. Now, in my case, I like to just free sketch. All right. I really like free sketching, and it's almost like doing what we did here. But as I'm free sketching, I'm thinking about perspective as I go, and I'm cutting little edges and little indicators as I'm sketching for like bevels, perspective in general, vanishing points, things like that. A lot of times I go way off path with this, but it's doable because like now I can start to create those lines converging every time, and it's like, you know, I get the idea of what I'm kind of doing here with these pieces, so I can just kind of work and guesstimate what I'm doing. But I don't have to lay out a grid necessarily as I go through this, right? Because I'm kind of creating a grid on my shape as I go. It doesn't always work out very well. Sometimes you can run into issues and you'll still need to create a grid on top of it or a guide. But it is doable, and it's definitely something to get started. It's a fun way of working, because then later on, you know, you can get more serious with it and say like, I need absolutely my limits, right? And they need to converge, and then I need to make sure this middle one here is going to go in the right direction. You can see that edge is maybe a little off, right? So you could go back and correct things like that possibly. And this is why just sketching in general, loose sketching at that, can be so powerful, because you're just able to go through it so fast and correct things and not really get too caught up in all kinds of nonsense. Like, these should, in theory, kind of converge back to like the same points. So like, you know, we have like this going, you know, those are converging perhaps, but very subtly. So it's not very strong of a thing there. But if we do another one in the middle and guesstimate what it's doing a little bit, like we can make this pop out right here. Can run that down straight through, you see? So when you guys see me free sketching, if you see me doing all kinds of little weird marks and stuff, just randomly almost, this is pretty much what's going on. Just trying to figure out like where my symmetry might be, roughly. I'll probably get it off, but it's okay. And then get rid of any additional edges I don't need. So if you're trying to develop like crates for games and stuff like that, that's just a fun one to know. It's all perspective for the most part. It's more about working with the perspective and then thinking about how to elaborate things further, you know, like pulling this edge out, bringing it back up, creating an edge here, doing that. We can't see nothing going on, so, you know, we need to erase some stuff maybe. You see, and then, oh, we erased too much. We got to sketch it back real quick. A lot of trial and error. And as you practice more and you get better at it, you know, it's still nice to use trial and error, but some guys just, they get good at it, and they free sketch whatever they want really fast, like very purposefully too. I am not that artist, but if you are, more power to you. So definitely enjoy the process of using perspective. Have fun with it. I'll see you in the next one. All right. Take care.